All right, doing the rankings for the top 10 players that I think could win Offensive Rookie of the Year a year from now. These are not necessarily the players that I think are the best players, because I am factoring in situation and, if you aren't going to get playing time, probably not going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, right? But these are just the players I think have the best chance too, so without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, Will Levis, which, listen, to me, honestly, there was a drop-off after 9 players, and so I had to pick a 10th, and I feel like if Will Levis was able to get playing time, if Ryan Tannehill gets injured early on, which, to be honest, that seems like the only scenario I could really see this happening is an early injury to Tannehill, then you could have a scenario where obviously they love to give the award to quarterbacks if they can. Brock Purdy was an Offensive Rookie of the Year candidate last year. So for Levis, it's definitely, it's an option, not a great option. I doubt he's going to get enough playing time, but enough to put him on the list, but I couldn't put him any higher than 10. Number 9, we're now going to the guys who I think realistically I could see winning it. Quentin Johnston is someone who I think is really good. I think he's a very good player. I had him as my favorite wide receiver, despite the fact that he is actually only the 4th highest wide receiver I have on this list, largely due to I just don't know if he's going to really get the playing time and the targets and really just be able to be a true number 1 receiver. I think he's going to play a lot of in different ways. I think they're going to have him play some slot, which isn't maybe necessarily where he thrives. I would think. I think it's just going to take him. Not necessarily. I think he'll be bad, but just I don't know how much I love the fit as of right now, and it might be a draft where in 5 years it looks great, but is he going to be able to get the stats? Because that's usually what matters is stats. Is that going to happen? I just don't know. It could, but as of right now, because of the fact that he's kind of the team's number 3 receiver right away, and I don't know if he's going to get better than a number 3 receiver, and I think that he fits more as a team's number 1 or 2 receiver, I think it's going to take a little bit of time, so that's why I have him at 9. Number 8, the Minnesota Vikings, Jordan Addison, another wide receiver. Now, he is coming in to be their number 2 wide receiver, so he's going to get some targets, and the Vikings have been pretty effective at passing the football, and with Jefferson taking attention off, could I see a scenario where Addison is able to get a good amount of yards and, potentially win Offensive Rookie of the Year? I could see it, although I don't know, again, for him to win it, I don't know if he's going to be able to pass the top 7, which is why I have him at 8. Number 7 is Zay Flowers, and I think there's a bit of a tier jump as well from 7 to 8, where I do think that Zay Flowers is somebody who I think is really good, and I also think that he's someone who could potentially, for all we know, be the Ravens' number 1 wide receiver by the end of the season. That's not crazy to think about, and for you to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, that might be what you have to do. We know Jordan Addison isn't going to be number 1. We are pretty sure Quentin Johnston is not going to be number 1, at least not after his first season. Flowers has a legitimate possibility. Again, Odell was there. You assume he's going to start the year as the number 1, but I think Flowers should be able to do some nice things, fit that offense really well, and it's not crazy at all to think that he could win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Number 6 is Jaxon Smith-Njiaba. So just like how there were these 4 guys all picked one after another in the regular draft, I have them in my list all right after, one another, although not the same order, but still, this is where I happen to have them. It wasn't intentional. It's just kind of, I think, similar ideas of a lot of these players, but Jaxon Smith-Njiaba is going to get a good amount of targets, I think, because of the attention that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett will take off of him, and he fits that number 3 role. The difference between him and Johnson, I think, is that for Smith-Njiaba, this is where he wants to be. That's the ideal scenario of how to use him would be in a situation like that. So because of that, I could easily see him racking up some yards and being able to be an Offensive Rookie of the Year. So yeah, had 4 receivers on this list, all right after one another. Now let's get into the top 5. I think there's a real chance Jahmyr Gibbs can win Offensive Rookie of the Year for several reasons here. I think for one, I think he's a good player. Would I have drafted him then? No, I wouldn't have, but I still think he's a good player, and I still think that he should be able to just be a good player for them pretty frequently. So that's number 1. That's why I think it could happen. And number 2, again, we have seen it happen before where when there's a controversial selection, the team's more willing to give them some carries, right? If it's a goal line scenario, maybe we put Gibbs in there instead of somebody else. That's something we've seen happen before. I think with the Lions, they'd be a smart enough team to not do that and just still just say we're gonna use him the way we want to use him. But clearly, if you're gonna spend that high of a draft pick on a running back, you like them a lot to make them a key part of your offense, and that's what they're expecting Gibbs to be. And we'll see if he can be that. But he's definitely gonna get touches, and running backs are a position that tend to hit the ground running, no pun intended there, because they tend to year one be very good right away. It doesn't take them as long as it takes other positions to be successful, so I have him at 5. Number 4 is Anthony Richardson, who I did dock a couple of spots just because I do think he's a project. I think it'll take him some time to fully develop, and because of that, I had to put him at 4 and behind the other 3. But I think there's a real chance Richardson can win. He's a quarterback, and being a quarterback gives you opportunities. It just does. If Ty's going to go to the quarterback, right? Dak Prescott won it over Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, Elliott was a much better running back than Prescott was a quarterback, but because Prescott was the quarterback, he's more valuable. They do sometimes factor in value in that scenario. I think if Richardson really, his running ability should be able to be good day one. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that his running ability is good, allows him to be the best quarterback out of these guys, and because of that, can win. But I think that I'm not going to bet on that necessarily, so that's why he's at 4. Number 3 is Bijan Robinson, who's actually the Vegas favorite to win the award as it stands right now. I have him at 3, though. Listen, I totally get it. He's going to get the carries. And he's going to get the yards. And he's going to be good. So, yeah, absolutely, there's a very real chance he could win it. Couple things holding him back is, like I said, Ty goes to the quarterback. Spoiler alert, my top 2 picks are quarterbacks. So that's the only thing. And also, guys get injured. Running backs are more likely to get injured, so that's kind of what hurts him as well. It makes it a little bit less likely that this happens, but I still think there's a very real chance that he wins the award, totally. Number 2, CJ Stroud. So what works against CJ Stroud is I don't know what Houston has exactly, and that's kind of a bit concerning of, is he going to be in a great situation to succeed right away? There are some issues on tape. It's going to take him some time to fully develop. It is. It's going to take him some time. But again, he's a really talented player. He was my favorite quarterback out of this draft class, and he is someone who I think that could potentially come into the league and be a good player right away. But there's just one quarterback I like a little bit more to be good immediately, and that is my number 1 pick. Number 1, Bryce Young. Of course, you knew it was Bryce Young. You knew it was going to be Bryce Young because he's the number 1 overall pick. I think Carolina, again, another thing worth mentioning, similar to Houston, and honestly similar to Indianapolis to some degree, not exactly perfect situations you're getting brought into here. Typically when you get drafted that high, you're not in a perfect situation. But I just think Young is a little bit more NFL ready as it stands right now. And also, more people, listen, this is the real thing. Whether we want it to be a real thing or not, it's a real thing that when you get drafted does matter. If you get drafted first overall, you have a better odds to win than someone who was drafted second overall, and especially if it's, let's say Will Levis and Bryce Young end up, Tannehill gets hurt in preseason, they have the exact same caliber of season, Young's probably going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year because people want to confirm their priors. That's just how that tends to work, even though it shouldn't. So that's going to work towards Bryce Young, and just in general, I think Bryce Young is going to have a lot going for him, I would say. So yeah, Bryce Young seems like the favorite, but I could see any of the top 9 winning it. To be honest, 10 would be a little bit of a stretch, but even that has a sliver of hope. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.